All right, guys, welcome back in to the Cover 3 College Ball Podcast. We're extremely pleased to be joined by Matt Prehm of our Oregon 24/7 Sports site, also of Outs and Audibles, awesome Oregon podcast available on all your podcast apps, and of course, as well on YouTube. We're starting something here. It's called our Around the Clock series with 24/7 Sports. Kind of like the name. We're going to put 15 minutes on the clock. We're going to get the inside scoop on all that team action that you want to know. We know we just kind of covered some of this in the spring gleaning series, but that was in the spring. Now we're in the summer. It's time for a little bit more deep dive. We're going to bring on the experts here. We're very lucky to be partnered with our sister site, 24/7 Sports, to be able to have these experts. And so, Matt, glad to have you, man.
Absolutely, bud. How's it going?
Going well. I'm hoping this is going to go as well as Chip Patterson. I think it will. And we're excited to talk to you about the Ducks. So 15 minutes are on the clock now. All right, so Oregon coming off back-to-back really successful seasons under Coach Mario Cristobal. Recruiting is kind of unlike anybody else in the Pac-12 for the most part. What's the vibe right now in Eugene?
Yeah, from a recruiting standpoint, you're kind of in that golden age mentality for Oregon football because they've never had this kind of success sustained over 3 or 4 years now that Cristobal is going at it. They've had top 10 classes. They've had, the best class in conference history before, or conference for the year, but they've never done it in succession, year after year. And they're going for, what is it? Like the third or fourth straight year of leading the conference in recruiting. They're currently there right now. They're first in the conference. And it's at a clip that we've never seen before under Mario Cristobal. So the expectations from a recruiting standpoint from the fan base, where it's fair or not, is kind of top 10. And, I don't know how long Oregon can sustain that because they don't have a deep recruiting base in the state of Oregon, but Cristobal is going to try. And, I'm not going to doubt him right now.
As a head coach, how have you seen him evolve? I know, and has he ever talked about this? I know on Barton and Bud, we used to discuss a little bit. Some of his game management was maybe not the best when he started out. There were a lot of sort of punts in opponent territory and a lot of let's run the ball on first and second down and ask your QB to bail you out on 3rd and 7. But it seemed like last year he took a big step forward in game management areas. Has he discussed that at all? Or what have you seen?
He's not discussed it too much. I think that also comes with the trust in his offensive coordinator, Joe Moorhead. And that's going to be a big topic for what we're going to be watching in the first couple of games and throughout the year this season, because for the time that he's been here at Oregon before last year, and then the couple years even before he got here, Oregon's not really had a reliable kicker. So whenever it got to that, hey, it's 4th and 3 and you're at the 35 or the 37, what do you do? And sometimes, a lot of Duck fans got used to the Chip Kelly and the Mark Helfrich mantra of, hey, we're going to be ultra aggressive. We're going to go for it. And that kind of bled over from an expectation standpoint for what Willie Taggart and for what now Mario Cristobal were doing. And they haven't had a kicker. And so they were kind of in that weird spot where it's like, we don't really know what to do. And Cristobal always went safe. And, I've been against that in some of his decisions. I do think his decision to run the ball against Stanford in 2018 when they fumbled, I think that was probably the right call, but it just didn't work out. Odds, how likely is a guy going to fumble like that? But now that they have a kicker in Henry Cattleman, made a 52-yarder with ease in the spring game, that's going to be the question that happens this season is what happens when it's 4th and 5 at the 36. Do they kick or do they punt? And if they punt, that's going to be a big side of criticism for him is he's too safe. But I think with the new offensive coordinator and Joe Moorhead and better familiarity with what he wants and what the offense can do, and now having a kicker, we might see a little bit more of a risky Mario Cristobal.
So you want to start positive or negative here? Because we mentioned, pre-call and little show meeting. Let's set the expectation that most of the fan base, the reasonable fans at least, think another top 10 season is something that most reasonable fans, I think, have cited. I'm going to ask you 2 questions, so pick whichever one you want first. But sure. What if they don't get there it's because of this, or if they exceed that, it's because of this?
So the expectation in Eugene is they win their third straight league title. And I think if they don't do that, it's probably because of a couple things. Anthony Brown at quarterback probably is not as good as expected, and the freshmen are not up to speed to maybe take that job and to win at a high level. So quarterback play will probably be the biggest deterrent for them to get there. I would also argue, they were very bad against the run defensively up front from defensive line perspective. I don't know if very bad is the right way to describe it, but they weren't nearly as good as they were the last couple of seasons. And that drop off continues. They've got some stud linebackers. They've got Kayvon Thibodeau off the edge, but up front in the middle of that D, what do you have? And so I would argue that maybe doesn't materialize in the way that you would anticipate it to. And then they're very thin at corner right now. And so the other hindrance could be they get hit with an injury or two injuries, or maybe a Dante Manning or a DJ James or a Triquez Bridges. These are guys trying to fight for that second starting job opposite Mikael Wright, who's an NFL player next year. One of those guys isn't as good as expected. So that's kind of where I would land. They've got every starter back along the offensive line and from a positive standpoint, and they're adding two of the best players they've ever signed to that position to this recruiting class, to this program now. So every starter's back, and you're adding more talent into the mix. Your running backs are back. Your talent at receiver is maybe as stocked as it's ever been going into a season in 5 or 6 years. I'd argue since the year they played for the championship game against Ohio State. So if they do reach expectations, what has to go right? They probably hit at quarterback. And they're
meaning Anthony Brown or meaning Ty Thompson?
I think it's going to be Anthony Brown. I mean, he took every single rep in spring ball with the first team offense, and he was the most consistent guy. He doesn't have nearly the ceiling that a Ty Thompson, a Jay Butterfield, or a Robbie Ashford has, but his floor is significantly higher right now than all three of those guys. So, I mean, I like to describe it as like his peaks and valleys are very small, and Ty's and Jay's and Robbie's are very deep. They can go really high, or then they can make a couple plays where it's like, whoa, you're not there yet. So I think this is going to be a team in which they hit on Anthony Brown, and then defensively they're really good again against the run. They were stout against the run in 2019 and 2018. And so can you get back to that level of production? And if you do, you can lean on your defense to kind of win you these games until the offense gets up to speed.
So with Tyler Shough, it is Shough, right?
Yeah.
When Tyler Shough transferred out, a lot of us in the media who don't cover Oregon on a day-to-day basis were wondering, like, is he, I don't want to say scared of Ty Thompson, but is he seeing the writing on the wall with Ty Thompson, or was that writing? It sounds like maybe from what you're telling me, maybe the writing on the wall was more written by Anthony Brown.
I think, and this kind of goes back to the safe mentality of Mario Cristobal. One of the biggest things that wasn't covered from a national perspective, and I understand why it wouldn't be, but during the COVID year of 2020 was and even in Arizona State's perspective, or Arizona's, they could practice in June. They could practice in July with the team. In the state of Oregon, health restrictions prevented that from happening. So while some schools back east in the South, they were all training as a group on campus, and they were getting their weight training programs going on. Oregon's players, they were all spread out across the country, and they couldn't practice together. They couldn't be in the facility. And so I think Cristobal in 2020 went with the safe pick at quarterback. Hey, Shough's been here. He went through a couple spring practices. Anthony Brown wasn't even part of the program at that time. This is a guy that knows kind of what Cristobal expects, has been in the program for a couple of years. Let's roll with him and see what happens. And I think the mistake was not trying Anthony Brown sooner, see what you had there until the end of the year. And so why did Shough leave? From what we were told, it was a case of, hey, you're in a quarterback battle. We know you started all 7 games, but you're in a quarterback battle. And it might not have been just Ty Thompson's arrival. It might have been also, hey, Anthony Brown's going to have to step up as well. And all three of you guys, or Jay Butterfield, all five quarterbacks are going to have to duke it out. And sounds like he maybe didn't want that. His confidence had been shot from how he ended the year. And, it was kind of one of those deals where it just felt like, I'm going to have to win this job again. I lost my confidence, and it's going to be a different year. I just need a fresh start. Go somewhere else where fresh start. So that's kind of all what played into, from what we've been told, Tyler Shuck's departure.
That makes a lot of sense. And certainly it may not have been Shuck's job if you had a real offseason, right? Like, it's not like you're losing jobs. Like, you never had it. They had a true offseason. All right. Sticking on the offensive side of the ball here. One of the stats that we pulled out in our spring gleaning series was Oregon was 113th in the country in terms of percentage of the passes that went to outside receivers.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. I mean, what do we have? 127 teams play last year because a couple opted out entirely. And that's bottom 10% in the nation. But yet you feel, I know listening to Odds and Audibles, you feel really good about this receiver group. Probably the best you felt in quite some time. Who are the dudes who could emerge on the outside and be like, all right, you got to feed these beasts?
Yeah. And this is the reason why we're so optimistic at this position group is just the body types. They've not had this before or this many of the 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" type guy. I said when they went to the Rose Bowl and played Wisconsin in 2020, if you looked at Oregon's receiving core that year and you would then look at an Alabama's or a Clemson's or an Ohio State's or LSU's, their receivers just looked different, physically different than what Oregon's was. Guys that are 6'3", 6'2", 6'4", 6'5", where Oregon was starting, multiple guys in 2020 and 2019 that were 6'1", 6 foot, 5'11", or even shorter than that. And now a big reason why we think that they're going to take that next step is they've started to accumulate some of those taller receiver guys. A couple of them are in the program. Devin Williams, the USC transfer, he had a huge spring. He's the only guy on the team last year who had 2 100-yard performances in games in 2020. He's expected to make a big leap, and Cristobal was really adamant towards the end of the year last year how much he's developed and grown in his game. And Micah Pittman is a guy that when he's on the field is really good. The issue is, as a freshman in 2019, he had 2 different injuries that kept him out of half the year, and then in 2020 he missed half the year because of COVID-19 protocols, because of quarantining. And so, when he stays on the field, he's really good. So those are 2 names that are in the program. Johnny Johnson's back. He's a really solid guy, but he's more like a really good 2 type receiver. Newcomers, Troy Franklin and Dante Thornton, both guys had big plays in the spring game. I think 40-yard catches each. And they're freshmen. And the expectation is that they're going to show up. And I don't know if they're going to start, but it's going to be a year, I think, where we see each of these guys have games where it's 9 catches for 118 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, it wouldn't blow me out of the water if each of those guys does something like that in the season.
Awesome. We can usually assume the offensive line is either good to damn good under Mario Cristobal. Any reason for us to doubt this group this year?
I wonder. I mean, obviously there is no Penei Sewell on this team, and that's a very high ask. Like, that's a freak of a nature type of a player.
Sure.
But there isn't that first round top 20 draft pick in my eyes on this team. I do wonder how good can they be, in creating running lanes for their running backs. That was a big struggle for them this past season. And the players themselves, Alex Forsythe, the starting center, he was an all-conference player, junior last year. He came out and was like, look, no excuses. We weren't good enough. But he also said that the team struggled to replace all 5, starters from the 2019 team. And that's what they had to go through in 2020. So I look at this group and think there's probably a couple NFL guys on this team along the offensive line. But I don't know if they're going to have that talent to get to where they were in 2019, where pretty much everybody thought they were the first, second, or third best offensive line unit in the country.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, now flipping to the other side of the football, Andy Avalos did a really nice job, obviously for Oregon for a couple of years there defensively. He goes and he took Boise, correct?
Yeah.
The head coach now at Boise State. So they bring in defensive coordinator Tim DeRuyter, who had been at Fresno and A&M and a couple other spots along the way. He typically has run a 34 type defense,
Yeah.
I believe. It sounds like you're being kind of secretive there in Oregon this year.
Yeah, it is very secretive what they're running. In the spring game, they ran kind of a 2-4-5 defense, and I think the big hot topic from defensively was what is Tim DeRuyter going to be running from a scheme standpoint, and then the second biggest question was where does Kayvon Thibodeaux fit in this group? Because the first day of spring ball, when we were doing our Zoom interviews, he comes out and goes, yeah, I love it. I'm outside linebacker. Here we go. I'm not on, my hand's not in the dirt anymore. And then about 20 minutes later, Cristobal gets on, is whoa, pump the brakes. He's still a D end. He's still going to be his hand in the dirt. And then that story basically carried for over the next 14 spring practice availabilities that we got. I look at Kayvon Thibodeaux, and he was listed as an outside linebacker in the official box score that the school provided from the spring game. But it's all about just how you dress up him and what kind of position is he playing. Same type of role. He's an edge guy. He's going to be attacking the quarterback from the blind side. He's going to be solid against the run. And it's just, is his hand going to be in the dirt or is he going to be standing up? That's basically you're deploying him in two different ways, but the end result's still going to be the same thing for him. How everybody else fits, that's kind of a mystery right now. It sounds like it's a kind of a hybrid 2-4-5, 3-4 defense. And they've also got the capability and they've said they're going to do this. And when they play like a Stanford, who's adamant about running the football almost every down, they'll go more to like a 4-2-5 defense with 4 defensive linemen and 2 linebackers in there with their 5 DBs. So I would call it a multiple set, and we probably talked way too much X's and O's.
No. I think this is why we bring on those experts from 24/7 Sports. I do have one question. Are you cool setting this thing into overtime? Let's put 4 more minutes back on the clock.
Sure.
All right. So I look at this schedule. In my brain, 2 more things you said I wanted to touch on. Number 1, you said corner is a big mystery right now. This schedule through, I would say, mid-October is very friendly to breaking in corners, right? Like Arizona's passing game doesn't scare me. Ditto, Cal, Stanford, Fresno, not really. But there is one team that just had a kid transfer out, and he transferred at the receiver position, and he transferred to Alabama, presumably to be a starter for the Tide, and that's Ohio State. How in the world do they get like is there any hope that they're ready for that matchup from a covering receivers perspective, given that Ohio State probably has the best receiving core in the country by a mile?
Yeah.
It seems tough.
Playing Ohio State in Ohio State with a new quarterback, new defense, at least one new corner is going to be tough. This is a game from an Oregon perspective. They want this game to be turned into a neutral site game because it wasn't played in Eugene last year. I like Oregon's 2 starters, Mykael Wright and DJ James. The question becomes, what do you have behind those 2 guys? Because you need probably 4 more to truly, play at a high level defensively. Jamal Hill's a nickel back, but he's not a pure corner. I do worry about Ohio State, but like you said, everybody else, up until maybe that UCLA game, maybe the Stanford game, you look at this and think, yeah, it's set up for success for Oregon, and from a corner's perspective of breaking guys in and figuring guys out and what they can and can't do. So yeah, if they open the year in their first 5 games or 6 games, they go 5-1. I think that's probably a really good start to the year and kind of what's a fair expectation.
I would agree. All right. Now, last one I have for you, staying on the defensive side of the ball. Thibodeaux demands so much attention. If they get it right, as far as I agree with you, the defensive line last year against the run was not optimal. They were 90th in the country in defensive rushing success rate allowed, it looks like, on the advanced stats page here. Who is the guy or 2 who step up along the defensive line alongside Thibodeaux who make the impact against the run.
Yeah, Brandon Dorlus is the first one that comes up, a 3-star guy from Florida. He's played the last 2 years, and basically in 2020, his game got to the point where it was he has to start, he has to play. And another guy, Christian Williams, towards the end of the year, they started Christian Williams at defensive tackle over Jordan Scott, who was a 4-year starter, up until that end of the stretch run of the 2020 season. So those are 2 names I would really kind of pencil in as guys that could make impacts. Braden Swinson is a freshman. He got to play last year and was pretty impressive in the little amounts of time that we saw him. And then Popo Amave and Keon Ware Hudson are 2 guys that have played a ton of football over the last 2.5 years of Oregon's season, and are guys that haven't been starters, but have played significant roles off the bench and now are in that position where they could start. So it's kind of where I would look at things up front. And then you also have to factor in that Justin Flo is going to be healthy at linebacker, and him and Sewell are totally different body types than we've ever seen before at Oregon. So having Flo healthy will also help in that regard.
This is the real benefit and this is why you follow recruiting, right? And this is why as a school you recruit so well, because you don't have to guess as far as who the replacements are quite as much. The expectation is now there that Oregon's going to have quality players be able to step up when important guys do leave. Matt, that's the end of Overtime. Really appreciate you coming on here. Check out Oregon 24/7. Check out the Odds and Audibles podcast on YouTube, on whatever podcast app you guys prefer. Really appreciate it. This has been Around the Clock, 24/7 Sports on the Cover 3 College Football Show.